Hey everybody, it's the Nitty Professor, and yesterday we were all reminded that, quote, fear is the tool of a tyrant. There are a lot of people out there who are trying to make us afraid. They are doing a pretty good job of it, and there are a lot of good reasons why they will benefit from this taking place. So it's our job to prevent that from happening. So the question I researched is how our skills as crafters, as knitters, as crocheters, as weavers, spinners, can help us to quell our fears, to control our fears, and to prevent those who want to keep us afraid from achieving that end. So I have 8 points to make that hopefully will be helpful. And the first one regards the fact of craft serving the role of emotional regulation. So when we do this kind of thing, we are regulating our nervous system, we're maintaining our calm, we're managing our anxiety through meditative acts that help us to have a kind of a calming rhythm in our actions. It's very comforting, and often it's, crafts like this that can prevent despair from taking over, can promote clear thinking. I was reminded of that recently when I learned from someone how they use their crafting to manage their grief. Sometimes certain crafts can provide us of reminders, if we associated them with maybe a better state of affairs. But to the extent that we have a craft, for me, that would be knitting and spinning mainly, that takes our thoughts away from things that make us sad, make us depressed, make us anxious, and we can benefit from this whole tactile experience of, the rhythmic movements back and forth that bring into being something that didn't exist before. It can be extremely helpful, and it's it's like a tool in your toolkit. You know what I say? I'm saying it's just one very useful experience that we can gravitate towards that just helps us to restore our calm and keep sane, really. A second way to leverage crafting, like knitting, woodworking, gardening, all kinds of those things, is to think in terms of embodied courage through making. So whenever you complete a project, you've basically scored a victory. It's like tangible evidence of our resilience, tangible evidence of our agency, of our ability to enact things, to make things happen. It sort of posits action as possible, but more than that, it's also as worthwhile. So it's the process of knitting or crocheting or felting, whatever it is that calms us, but it's also the product of that activity that just gives us proof, once again, that as human beings, we can make things happen. It's like a good reminder, and can sort of, I think it could serve as a springboard to remind us that if we just do something, it's going to have an effect, So it's like, well, don't sit around and do nothing. Just try to do something. It's like one stitch at a time. And I address a lot of these things in my novels, and it's really helpful for me to watch how my characters deal with circumstances that are beyond their control. And they take things into their own hands as crafters, and by extension, as human beings. So that's number 2. So number 3 is the preservation of cultural memory. When we craft, a lot of times what we're doing is we're perpetuating traditions that go way back, to our ancestors, and they remind us of where we come from and of who we are. So, we don't necessarily need to be the people that those with power want us to think we are. They want us to conceive of ourselves as, weak, helpless, cowering. But by embracing long-standing traditions that people have leveraged for millennia and sort of reclaiming those, we're also strengthening this sense of continuity that we have and of identity and of belonging to a cultural, to a past that has a lot of positive attributes and stability. So this sense of stability, the fear that's being imposed on us is shaking us. It gives us a feeling of instability that we feel desperate then to somehow restore. But maybe it's not a question of restoring. Maybe all we have to do is remind ourselves that in many ways that stability is still there. We can still make the same garments that our grandparents made. We can make the same furniture that our great-grandparents made. We can reenact the same survival skills that helped our forefathers survive their instability. It's not like this is anything new. I've spent a fair amount of time living inside the walls of countries that were run by dictators. I spent a lot of time in Hungary. I spent time in Yugoslavia. I spent time in Czechoslovakia. I spent time in East Germany when those were the names of those countries. And, when I was growing up, nobody really had any idea that any of that would change. And it was heartening to see how people could, in spite of the fact that they were living with the Black Maria that could come down the street in Budapest and pick up your uncle or whatever, they could still carry on. They could still do things that reminded them that at bottom, we deserve to be free. We deserve to live the kind of moral and ethical lives that we desire and that we're capable of. And that it's not necessary for us to succumb and to kneel, right? That was another word that was used yesterday. So when we perpetuate these kind of traditions, we're reducing our sense of vulnerability and our vulnerability to fear-driven narratives. So we're sort of fending off that. It's like, no, you can't make me afraid. I've got my identity. I know who I am. Right? And I am enacting my identity through my craft. So that's number 3. Number 4 is communal solidarity. So especially when we are working in craft circles, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a fiber gold. The other week I was at the Fiber Festival, as you all know, in Watertown, and all I had to do was go up to someone and start talking about my novels, and they got it right away. It's like we belong together. We have solidarity. When you're in a circle like that too, it's much easier to share without judgment. It doesn't always happen, but it certainly is easier because you have this thing in common that binds you, and that becomes like a priority. And so if you start sharing in a way that tensions arise or something, I think it's a lot easier to lessen those and lower the temperature because you can always go back to who we are as a group. This even happened in my writers group the other day, and it was kind of interesting how it was handled because ultimately we were there because we're writers. So we could like gently remind each other of maybe, something we disagreed with, but at bottom, we belong together. We have solidarity, and our judgment is going to be limited because of that. We're also reducing isolation because in societies where fear is the sort of the power mechanism that helps to strengthen the power of the people above, anything we can do to remind ourselves that we have this kind of togetherness, and that it will reduce our isolation. It will help us to be less fragmented. That is a good thing. And look at that. Got to start another ball of yarn. It can just be extremely useful to feel like you belong and to do so in a way that's active, in a way that is enacted and embodied, right? Not just say I belong, but, to actually be in the group, in person, even on Zoom sometimes, It's just a really helpful feeling, so we're not fragmented. So that's number 4. Number 5 is symbolic resistance. And when I looked at this, I think, to me, the primary example of that is reclaiming public spaces. And I've mentioned this kind of thing before. In fact, it's come out in my novel that when you claim a space that's public as a site of creative resistance, like, for example, through yarn bombing, that can be a really powerful reminder that we're not helpless. And we can resist peacefully. You know, we don't have to change our essence as fundamentally peaceful people. We can resist in ways that are not destructive, but constructive and creative. And we can do so in a way that attracts the attention of other people and serves as, you know, a reminder to the forces, the powers that be, that we're not done. You know, we're there. We out here, right? So that's number 5. Number 6 is slowing time in an anxious society. So this is, in many ways, for many people, it's an age of anxiety. And I think of, you know, in particular, my trans friends. I mean, it's a time of great anxiety. And sometimes it helps to just slow down, take a breath, to remind ourselves that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You know, just slow down. Just try to calm down so that you can collect your thoughts and take time to remind each other that, again, we're still here. We can manage the situation, and to remind ourselves that the last thing we want to do is let those with power reduce us to the kind of people that they want us to be, which is, you know, cowering in fear and feeling desperate for any answer, no matter how it compromises our values. No, it's not who we are. If we just kind of slow down, take a breath, and we use our craft as a means of accomplishing that, it can be very heartening. And, you know, some people don't have that. I mean, I know people who don't have hobbies. And I'm like, how do you even function? I was talking to my retirement advisor a couple weeks ago, and she's like, I'm not too worried about you being retired because you got stuff to do. But she says there are people out there who, when they're no longer working, they kind of lose their mind. So by crafting, we're fending that off big time. So let's look at number 7, providing comfort through concrete manifestations of care. And I know a lot of you knit, you crochet for other people, and you give what you make away. And there are all kinds of ways of doing that. Could just be to a friend, could just be to a daughter, could be to you know, a neonatal unit, it could be to homeless, unhoused people. There are all kinds of ways to do that. So these sort of concrete acts that demonstrate our humanity can provide a buffer against fear and networks of mutual aid that can be very empowering, very empowering. So the last one that I have on here, number 8, is modeling constructive citizenship. And the way that we are doing that is through socially supportive work. And what we want to have as an antidote to fear is courage. And in many ways, when we reclaim our humanity through crafting, we are embodying courage, right? We are being courageous, and we are supporting each other in networks of courage, and modeling the kind of citizens that we need to be in order to power through. So, you know, one of the reminders last night was of the need to vote. Some people can't vote, you know, but you can still put yourself out there, and remind people again that you're still there, you're still fighting, you're still making a difference. you're still resisting. So I thought it might be a good time to kind of, put this message out there. There are a lot of reasons to be afraid, and they're pretty much constructed artificial reasons that are being manufactured. And the best thing we can do in this atmosphere of manufactured fear is resist. And one of the best ways we can do that is just to keep on crafting. So with that, I want to wish everybody a really good weekend, and a weekend where you feel empowered, where you remind yourself of your agency, where you restore your calm and reclaim your humanity and your connection to those around you and those that came before you. And I want to thank those of you who've been reading my novels and commenting on them. I've gotten a lot of wonderful comments because, as is probably evident, a lot of these messages that I share, I also want to convey and perpetuate in what I write. It is entertainment. And you'll find in the upcoming volumes that this is something my sister's reminding me of a lot. There's a lot of magic realism, more than in the first volume. There's a little bit, but in the second volume it really comes to the fore. And I hope that from that standpoint, the novels that I continue to share with you will provide a similar sense of comfort and uplifting feelings for you as I have for my sister, who's been having her own things to deal with, as happen we all. I mean, we're all just sort of up against it right now. So thank you for your support. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon. Bye.